Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling a really iconic moment in American history, the Boston Tea Party.
Right, but we're coming at it from a slightly different direction.
Exactly. Not through the usual lens of the famous founders, but via this unique source. The 1834 publication, Retrospect of the Boston Tea Party, with a memoir of George R.T. Hughes.
And this source is so interesting because it really reframes how we might think about the revolution. It was written decades later, So it's about memory as much as history.
How that generation chose to remember where liberty came from.
Precisely. And the author makes a very deliberate choice. This isn't about John Hancock or Sam Adams. It's the story of George R.T. Hughes, a shoemaker.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive. We're not just recounting the event, the ships, the tea chests going overboard.
No, we're exploring the moral argument this memoir is making. It's quite profound, actually.
Which is that true liberty wasn't really secured by the elites, the ones we always hear about.
Right, the wealthy, the connected, but rather by the quiet virtue, the courage, even the anonymity of ordinary people like Hughes.
And the book starts with a real challenge, doesn't it? A pretty provocative idea right from the beginning.
It really does. It basically says that society, even this young American republic, tends to celebrate the powerful and just, ignore the useful and obscure citizens.
It's quite an accusation. They even bring in a historian from 2,000 years ago, Euthymenes.
Yeah, Euthymenes talking about the old Grecian Republic being too busy handing out favors to, quote, idle and powerful men to even notice the deserving common folk.
And the author just lays it out there. This same problem, this opprobrium, rests on the American people in 1834.
It's a direct hit. It's saying, hey, look in the mirror. Are we already slipping back into those old European ways where only money and status matter?
Where being poor or unknown means you're dismissed, your contribution forgotten.
Exactly. It's forcing readers then, and maybe us now, to ask, do we actually remember where our freedom came from? Did we elevate the financier and forget the shoemaker?
You can feel the anxiety in the writing. If a republic forgets that kind of moral backbone, the everyday courage,
then the foundations are shaky. If you only celebrate the political winners, the powerful, what happens to the democratic spirit?
And focusing on Hughes, a working man, is a clear statement. The book is arguing that the real soul of the nation isn't in inherited wealth or high office.
It's in the integrity of people like him, the ordinary citizen.
Okay, so before we really get into Hughes's life story, let's set the stage. What was the absolute core principle at stake here that led to something as drastic as the Tea Party?
It boils down to one fundamental issue. The British government claiming the right to tax Americans without their consent.
No taxation without representation. That wasn't just a slogan.
Absolutely not. For the colonists, representation and taxation were inseparable. If you don't have your own elected people in parliament voting on taxes, then any tax imposed on you is just arbitrary power. It's tyranny.
And the tea tax became the symbol of this whole fight, right?
Yeah.
Because they'd repealed other taxes.
Yes, most of the Townsend duties were gone. But they deliberately kept the tax on tea. It wasn't about the money, really.
It was a statement.
Exactly. A standing claim, the memoir calls it. A way for Parliament to constantly assert its supposed right to tax the colonies whenever it felt like it. To maintain this idea of, parliamentary power over everyone.
Let's unpack that phrase the source uses. Parliamentary omnipotence. It calls it an inexplicable enigma.
Yeah, and from the British perspective, it meant Parliament's authority was absolute, unchecked, legal power over everyone, everywhere in the empire, full stop.
But from the American perspective?
It meant being ruled by a distant legislature where they had no voice, no control. They saw it as essentially a form of slavery under the Constitution.
So the Tea Party wasn't just about expensive tea. It was very physical, very public rejection of that entire claim, enforced by ordinary people.
Precisely. And this leads us straight into the memoir's argument about the power of, humble actions.
It acknowledges the deliberate wisdom needed to sustain the republic, the thinking behind the Constitution.
Right, the framers, the big ideas. But it insists that wisdom wasn't enough to actually create the republic in the first place.
What was needed then?
Magnanimous deeds of courage incident to every condition. That's the key phrase. These acts of bravery, big and small, by all sorts of people, were indispensable. They bought the time for that wisdom to take shape.
We often focus on the founders debating in Philadelphia, but the book says we forget the countless acts of just, physical bravery that made that possible.
And it puts these ordinary heroes right up there with the famous statesmen. It doesn't distinguish.
Like Sergeant Jasper.
Exactly, Sergeant Jasper. A man in a, humble role, but he runs out under heavy fire to put the flag back up at Fort Moultrie. That single act of duty and incredible courage. The book treats it as just as vital as any political treaty.
And also mentions John Camp trying to capture Benedict Arnold.
At great personal risk, yeah. And maybe the most striking example is the anonymous heroine.
The woman who disguised herself as a man.
Yes. Joined the army, served for 3 whole years. Her sacrifice only came to light because she was badly wounded, possibly fatally. Think about that courage, that commitment.
So the message is clear. Acts of quiet conviction, whether from a soldier, a spy, or this woman, are just as important as the great man narrative. Moral bravery is the foundation.
It's universal. And by December 1773, that kind of courage felt like the only option left.
All the polite methods had failed. The petitions to London
completely failed. The people in Boston, they understood. They knew they'd reached an impasse. And they made a conscious decision, a fixed resolution, the memoir says, to resist physically, to stop those taxes being collected by force.
It wasn't a riot then. It was a deliberate next step after politics failed.
Very deliberate, and they seem to grasp the significance, too.
They saw it as bigger than just Boston.
Yeah, the source says they felt this act, destroying the tea, was part of something much larger, something destined to change, maybe even improve, the condition of mankind in all ages to come. They saw it as a stand for a universal right.
Wow. That's a heavy weight to put on destroying some cargo.
But look at the effect. The author argues that this single act, throwing tea in the harbor, became the first blow, which, to tyrants through the world, should echo as the knell of their departing hour.
A signal that ordinary people could successfully defy what they saw as unjust power.
And this brings us right to the man himself, the focus of the memoir, George Robert 12 Hughes.
Introduced as the embodiment of that useful and obscure citizen, the ultimate man of obscurity.
Absolutely, a shoemaker, living near Richfield Springs in New York when the book was written in 1834, one of the very last known survivors of the Tea Party.
And the author really paints a picture, contrasting his quiet, secluded life then.
Yeah, the death-like silence of his home down some forgotten road.
With the noise and action of his past, the clattering of 100 tomahawks he once wielded.
He was lost to fame, completely obscure by then, but he was there. He helped lay the foundation.
His life story, as told in the memoir, really emphasizes integrity and humility. It's almost like a lesson in Republican virtue.
It is. Born in Massachusetts, not much formal education, moderate reading and writing, lived a life of honest industry, married young, happily married for 70 years, raised a family. Simple, solid life.
But it's the specific stories that the author uses to show his core character, right? Like that one from his childhood.
Oh yeah, the story with his aunt and cousin. It's presented as key to understanding him.
Remind us how it goes. He gets punished by his aunt.
Right. She punishes him quite severely for calling his younger cousin a name, but the cousin had actually struck him first.
Okay.
And Hughes demands that his cousin get the same punishment, equal justice. But the aunt refuses to punish her own son.
So she punishes Hughes, but not the cousin who started it.
Exactly. And Hughes, who'd been strictly taught by his uncle never to tell a lie, gets angry but holds firm. He tells his aunt, essentially, if you won't punish him like you punished me, I will.
And he actually does it.
He does. Waits a few days, catches his cousin, and gives him the same punishment his aunt gave him.
Wow. What happened then?
The aunt finds out, locks him in the cornhouse until his uncle gets back. But Hughes defends himself. He doesn't claim innocence. He says he delivered equal justice, and importantly, he kept his word. He avoided telling a lie by doing what he said he'd do.
Okay, so this isn't just a story about a kid getting into trouble.
Not at all. The author uses it to show Hughes's ingrained sense of equal right and equal justice, even as a child.
He refused to accept unfairness, even from family authority. He insisted on principle.
Precisely. He wouldn't stand for a system where one person, his cousin, got special treatment, where the rules weren't applied equally. It's the same moral logic he applies later to Parliament's claims.
Resisting injustice becomes a moral duty, no matter the personal cost, even being locked in a cornhouse.
That's the connection the memoir draws. It's the root of his revolutionary spirit.
And this determination shows up again later, doesn't it, when he tries to join the army?
Yes, the rejected soldier story. He wants to enlist to fight the French, but he's too short. Back then, height was apparently a key measure of military fitness.
So what does he do?
He tries to cheat. He stuffs rags in his stockings, raises the soles and heels on his shoes, anything to make himself taller for the measurement.
Did it work?
Nope. The muster master saw right through it, reached down, pulled out the rags. Apparently, the officers had a good laugh.
That must have been embarrassing.
Probably. But here's the interesting part. They didn't punish him for trying to deceive them. Instead, they acknowledged he had the true spirit of a soldier.
So the determination, the willingness to overcome obstacles, even physical ones, was what mattered.
Right. The memoir even compares his spirit to Sir Walter Scott's youthful drive. It emphasizes that inner conviction is more important than outward appearances or, physical stature.
So this collection of virtues, fortitude, integrity, determination, even just quietly accepting hardship.
That's the significance of Hughes's obscurity, according to the book. Artificial greatness, political power, wealth, those things are presented as superficial, venal even.
What really holds up a republic, especially in tough times,
is the character shown by ordinary people like Hughes. His integrity is portrayed as more valuable than any amount of money or fancy titles.
So the memoir is holding him up.
Yeah.
This kid who demanded justice, this young man determined to serve, this lifelong honest worker. That's the democratic ideal. Not power, not wealth, but moral character.
Okay, so let's move to the main event. December 16th and 17th, 1773. The tension is sky high. The British naval commanders had apparently threatened to use cannon fire to get the tea unloaded by the deadline.
So on the 16th, the citizens gather. A big meeting in Boston.
Yes, citizens of Suffolk County. They get together for what the source calls grave consultation on how to stop the tea landing.
They try the official route one last time.
They do. They appoint a committee to go see Governor Hutchinson, ask him to basically side with the people, sort out the duty issue, give the government a final chance.
And Hutchinson's response?
Evasive. He wouldn't give a straight answer. And then when the committee goes back at the agreed time, 5 o'clock.
He's gone.
Vanished. Fled privately to his country house out in Milton.
And there's that great detail, possibly apocryphal, but telling, that he might have bolted mid-shave.
Yeah, the story went around that he escaped in the utmost haste across the fields, maybe even leaving the barber half-finished. Whether it's literally true or not, it shows the complete panic and breakdown of authority at the top.
The civil government basically collapsed at that moment.
Absolutely. So the committee returns to the huge crowd, reports the governor has flown the coop, the ultimate failure of the government to listen.
And the reaction? Not chaos.
No, interestingly, a confused murmur at first, but then it quickly coalesces into a single cry. People start shouting, "Let every man do his duty and be true to his country," and then a general huzzah for Griffin's Wharf.
So it's a call to action, but framed as individual duty.
Exactly. Not a mob frenzy, but a collective decision where each person takes responsibility.
And Hughes hears this call and acts immediately. He described getting ready.
Yes. He puts on the costume of an Indian, grabs a small hatchet, they called it a tomahawk, and a club.
The disguise wasn't just for fun, was it?
No, it served multiple purposes. Anonymity, obviously, to avoid prosecution later. But it also signified they were operating outside the usual rules, outside English law. It had a kind of ritualistic feel.
And again, the memoir stresses the organization, pushing back against any idea of this being just a random riot.
Definitely. Hughes is clear. They split into 3 groups to board the 3 ships, Dartmouth, Eleanor, Beaver simultaneously. He even names his division commander, Leonard Pitt. This was coordinated.
And Hughes himself, the shoemaker, gets a role.
Right away. He's appointed bosun for his team, his first job. Go to the ship's captain and demand the keys to the cargo hatches and candles.
How did the captain react?
Handed them right over. Hughes says he replied promptly and just asked that they didn't damage the ship itself or the rigging.
That's quite telling. It shows the protesters were completely in control.
It does, and it also highlights their focus. The target was only the taxed tea, not the ship, not the crew.
So they get the keys, get below deck.
And they get to work. They break open the chests with their hatchets, splitting them open so as thoroughly to expose them to the effects of the water. Systematic destruction aimed solely at making the tea unsaleable and the tax uncollectible.
How long did it take?
About 3 hours, Hughes estimates, to dump all 342 chests.
And the atmosphere afterwards?
This is crucial. Hughes says, no disorder took place during that transaction, and then he adds that it was the stillest night ensued that Boston had enjoyed for many months.
Stillness after such a dramatic act, even with British warships nearby.
Right. No confrontation, no looting, no further destruction, just the single focused act of defiance.
So the memoir really emphasizes the moral dimension here. This was property destruction, an act of hostility, really.
Yes, justifiable only in their minds by the political situation, essentially a state of resistance, and done without any legal cover, entirely on their own responsibility.
The disguises, the secrecy they maintain afterwards about who was involved.
It all underlines that this wasn't random violence. It was a calculated, disciplined, and very dangerous assertion of popular will against what they saw as unconstitutional authority, carried out by ordinary men acting on principle.
And the memoir uses Hughes's life to show this wasn't just a one-off event. Boston was a pressure cooker, right? This resistance was ongoing.
Absolutely. Hughes was there for other key moments, showing the constant friction. He wasn't just at the Tea Party. He witnessed the buildup.
Like the Boston Massacre in 1770, he saw it happen.
He was right there. And he provides this the specific detail about how it supposedly started. Over a very small thing.
Oh, was that?
A British officer allegedly didn't pay a barber's apprentice after getting shaved. The boy demands payment, argues with the sentry guarding the officer, and things just spiral out of control from there into the shooting on King Street.
Just shows how tense things were, how easily conflict could erupt.
Exactly. And Hughes was actually called to testify at Captain Preston's trial afterwards.
Preston, the officer in charge of the soldiers who fired.
Right. And this is where Hughes's character, his integrity, really comes through again.
Oh, so?
Under oath, questioned by John Adams, who was defending Preston, Hughes stated he believed Preston gave the order to fire, but he had to admit he could not definitively say he saw the captain's lips move.
So he stuck to the absolute truth, even if it didn't help the Patriot cause in that specific instance.
Precisely. He prioritized factual honesty over just telling them what they might want to hear. And that testimony actually helped lead to Preston's acquittal.
It shows the virtue the memoir celebrates isn't just blind anti-British feeling. It's a deeper moral integrity.
Yeah, it's about truthfulness, even when it's inconvenient.
Then there's that other really intense incident. Hughes was involved in the tarring and feathering of John Malcolm.
Yes, in 1774, Malcolm was a customs officer, one of the figures enforcing British authority. This story really shows the raw, extra-legal measures people felt forced into.
How did Hughes get involved?
Again, it starts small. Malcolm was apparently threatening a young boy with a cudgel. Hughes steps in, tries to de-escalate, tells Malcolm not to strike the boy.
And Malcolm turns on Hughes.
Viciously. Strikes him hard across the head with his heavy cane. Hughes gets a bad wound, a scar he apparently carried for life.
So Hughes becomes the victim here. What did the crowd do?
They exploded. Seeing Hughes injured, combined with all the pent-up anger against figures like Malcolm, they grabbed him, and they delivered what the book calls people's justice.
Which was?
Brutal. The memoir details it. 39 lashes, then thoroughly tarred and feathered. Then they paraded him through town to the gallows, whipped him again another 39 times, put a rope around his neck, came very close to actually hanging him.
It's shocking violence. Why include such a graphic account?
I think it serves to show the complete breakdown of normal legal channels. This wasn't portrayed as ideal, but as what happens when people feel they have no other recourse against perceived oppression and abuse of power. It shows the high stakes, the desperation.
And what happened to Malcolm after all that?
Get this. He apparently saved bits of his own skin with the tar and feathers still on them, took them back to England as proof of his suffering.
Seriously?
Yeah. And he was rewarded by the British government with a lifetime annual pension of £50 for his loyalty and his ordeal.
Wow. That just highlights the divide, doesn't it? Suffering for the crown gets rewarded. Suffering for liberty gets you obscurity.
Exactly. It underlines the cost and the choices involved. But vigilance wasn't just about street confrontations. The source makes a point to highlight another kind of sacrifice.
Women of Boston.
Yes, specifically their role in the boycott, particularly giving up tea.
Which sounds maybe trivial now, but wasn't then.
Not at all. The memoir stresses that the tea habit was inveterate. It was deeply ingrained, seen as both a daily necessity and a social luxury. Giving it up was a genuine hardship for many.
So it wasn't just a symbolic gesture.
No, it was presented as a real act of self-denial driven by principle. And the author elevates it, compares it very favorably to the famous story of Roman ladies giving up their jewelry in a crisis.
How does that comparison work?
The argument is the Roman women gave up superfluous toys, things they didn't truly need. But the American women gave up something habitual, a daily comfort, an indulgence. They were controlling an appetite, a personal desire for the greater good.
Making it a nobler act of self-denial.
That's the phrase used. It required more willpower, more moral fortitude. The author even suggests that if the women hadn't made that sacrifice, if they'd insisted on their tea, the whole non-importation movement might have failed.
And the revolution could have stalled.
Possibly delayed, maybe even lost. Their collective moral strength in this seemingly small domestic act was seen as crucial for maintaining the economic and political pressure. It fits the overall theme. Liberty depends on these quiet, often uncelebrated virtues practiced by everyone.
Which brings us right back to Hughes and the memoir's core argument about what real harm is.
Exactly. It circles back to insist that Hughes, the shoemaker who never got rich, never held office, he actually achieved something more lasting.
More substantial fame and durable glory than the conquest of the world should achieve for its hero. It's a powerful claim.
It is. And his life after the Tea Party seems designed to illustrate this point. He kept serving, kept sacrificing.
He fought in the war.
Yes, as a sailor on privateers and also in the militia, faced constant danger. There's a story about a rope breaking and him falling into the freezing North Atlantic. Just highlights the everyday risks for common soldiers and sailors.
Did he get any reward for this service? He was involved in capturing enemy ships, right? Prizes?
Yes, several British prize ships, loaded with valuable goods, oil, furs, rum, sugar. Capturing those should have meant a significant payout, a share of the bounty.
Which could have changed his life financially.
Absolutely. But Hughes states, quite plainly, that his share was always withheld. He never saw a penny of that prize money.
Despite risking his life to capture it.
Right, and he was continually called up for militia duty right until the war ended. So repeated service, repeated risk, zero financial gain from the spoils of war.
It perfectly fits the author's narrative. He served purely for the cause, not for personal enrichment. His motives are presented as completely pure.
Untainted by ambition or greed.
And then there's that really moving scene towards the end of his life, his final visit to Boston.
Yeah, in 1821, 50 years after the Tea Party, he goes back and finds the city completely changed, almost unrecognizable. Bigger streets, fancier buildings. It's a reflection on how much time had passed.
And he runs into someone.
Just by chance, in the market. An old man comes up to him, looks closely, and asks if he was in Boston during the Tea Party. Hughes says yes, he was one of the ones who threw the tea overboard.
And the other man.
Turns out he was one too, a fellow participant.
After 50 years.
Yes. They went and had a drink together, talked about being fellow citizens and sufferers in the cause of American liberty, and then they parted. And Hughes never saw him or any other Tea Party associate again.
Wow. That one chance meeting, the only one in half a century. It really drives home how that generation had passed, how Hughes was one of the last links to that moment.
It underscores the mutability of human affairs, as the text says. He'd outlived almost everyone from that time.
And despite living his later years in poverty, sometimes lacking basic necessities.
He kept his integrity, his mind was sharp, his spirit apparently cheerful. He accepted his fate. The memoir credits his long life, nearly 100, to his lifelong habits of hard work and moderation.
So his entire life becomes the lesson, not just the Tea Party, but the decades afterwards. Living proof that the Republic was built on this kind of sturdy, unassuming moral character.
And a clear contrast to what the author saw as the growing materialism and potential corruption of 1834 America. Hughes is the standard they're holding up.
So wrapping this up, the memoir's goal seems clear. To make sure we remember the Tea Party not just as an event, but as a statement.
A profound philosophical turning point. That physical act of destroying tea was a direct confrontation with that idea of absolute, inexplicable parliamentary power. It was disciplined, not chaotic.
In the core message, the real takeaway from focusing on Hughes is about the foundation of the Republic itself.
Right. That its survival depends on remembering and honoring the virtues of the ordinary citizens, the ones like Hughes who resisted tyranny.
Not for fame, not for power, certainly not for money.
But for conscience. For posterity. They physically enforced the principle of no taxation without representation. They showed that liberty requires constant vigilance, it requires humility, and it requires the courage to act when power goes too far.
So the Tea Party is both political and moral history. A lesson in how freedom was won.
It demonstrates the courage needed to purchase liberty, as the source puts it, but then it leaves us with this lingering, challenging question.
Aimed originally at the readers in 1834, but it definitely resonates today.
Yes. We proved we had the courage to buy freedom. But do we now have the wisdom and the virtue needed to maintain it, to ensure its duration?
Hughes, the obscure shoemaker, provided that initial courage demanding equal justice, taking action at the wharf. The question the memoir leaves hanging
is whether we, the inheritors of that liberty, still possess the quiet, everyday virtue needed to keep it alive. What are the small, obscure acts of integrity we need to commit to sustain it?
Well, that's about all the time we have. You've been listening to the deep dive from Wake Up and Smell the Freedom, where ideas percolate. Thanks for joining us as we continue to explore the ideas that shaped liberty and continue to shape us today. Remember, the pursuit of liberty begins with understanding, and understanding begins with asking the right questions. Until next time.
See you next time.